Hey guys, and welcome back to my channel. So before I start today, I want to apologize. My voice sounds a little weird. I'm coming down with like a little bit of a cold. I literally sneezed today and it sounded like the Nazgul screaming when Frodo stabbed one with a sword, and I was like, ooh, okay, this is a problem now. But yes, so please excuse my voice, please excuse my nails. I am getting them done this week because I have a wedding to go to, and I'm just kind of not even bothering with them at the moment, so sorry about that. But today I want to talk about something a little bit different. 90% of my channel focuses on horror lit, and every now and then I kind of share my scattered thoughts on like film and television that's going on in like the horror community. I'm a huge horror buff. I don't particularly enjoy talking about horror films the way that I talk about horror lit, just because I don't feel like I have as wide of a, I guess, knowledge on horror films as I do on horror lit. I worked for many years as an editor and as a writer, so I feel like I could just talk more about text as a craft versus visuals as a craft. But I do absolutely adore horror film and horror TV, and I thought it would be really cool to talk about this weird phenomenon that I've been seeing recently, where companies like Netflix and Hulu are grabbing indie horror stories and turning them into films and TV series. I guess not so much Hulu, but more like AMC. And I noticed that Netflix has been doing this quite a lot. And what really drew my attention to that was when they recently released the No One Gets Out Alive movie. That came out, I believe, on September 29th, which is obviously based on this novel by Adam Neville. They also did Adam Neville's other novel, The Ritual, which I think everybody has kind of heard of at this point. But I just thought it was interesting, and I've noticed that they're doing that with a lot of TV shows as well. I believe HBO is about to come out with another Let the Right One In adaptation. I don't know why we need another one of those, because the Swedish film is already perfect, the American one not so great, or at least not as great as the Swedish film. It's a fine film though. And then AMC obviously did an adaptation of The Terror, and right now Netflix has, Epix has Chapelwaite, which is with Adrian Brody, and it's an adaptation of Stephen King's Jerusalem's Lot, which I am watching right now and I am enjoying quite a lot. And then for everybody who asked me, because a lot of people did ask me this, and thank you guys so much for thinking of me, Netflix has just released the Chestnut Man TV series, and I am 3.5 episodes in. It is amazing. It is so true to the book, and that's definitely because Soren Sveistrup is one of the writers on it. So I'm very excited about that, and I will let you guys know my thoughts on that as that kind of unfurls. But yeah, and I know that we're getting like, The Last House on Needless Street I think is already being optioned for film. Devolution. A Head Full of Ghosts is being turned into a film. My Best Friend's Exorcism is being turned into a film. A lot of really cool, awesome stories are being turned into films and TV series. Grady Hendrix, I think, is turning Final Girl Support Group and Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires into TV series. One might be a movie, but I don't really remember. But I just thought it was really interesting because, let's be real, I hadn't heard of a lot of these authors before I heard about the hype of the movie. Like, I would not know who Adam Neville is. I would not know who Josh Malerman is if it wasn't for these films. And I do think that's really great in promotion. But then I go and watch the films, and I feel some kind of way. So I want to talk about probably the 5 biggest films that have come out from Netflix recently that take a horror indie novel and turn it into a horror film, some being extremely successful. And I think this is a really good thing, because right now we're in this weird stage of horror media where we either get something really incredible and original like Hereditary or Get Out. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming film Antlers, which is, I believe, an adaptation of a short story, or we just get remakes and sequels. Like, lots of remakes, lots of sequels. I just found out that they're going to remake The Lost Boys, and that like kind of like hurts my soul. I heard that they remade The Craft. That hurt my soul, and I didn't watch it, and I don't ever plan on it. And of course, like, just the never-ending sequels, which is a good thing in horror films. They're very fun. A lot of times sequels can be even better than the originals, so there's that. But I just like that they're taking some initiative to, you know, find new talent, give out new voices to the horror community, and put them into different media and different platforms. So let's talk about probably the one that really started this trend for me, which is The Ritual by Adam Neville. I have spoken about The Ritual probably a lot on this channel, definitely very, very recently, quite a few times, because I've been reading No One Gets Out Alive and talking just a lot about Adam Neville. This is the only book on this list of 5 novels today where I think the film adaptation is better and stronger than the book. I have many mixed feelings on this book, primarily because I absolutely adore the first half of this book. I think it is some of the best, most unique, coolest, creepiest, like, just contribution to horror lit today. And then the second half is just absolutely ungodly atrocious, and I hate every second of it. I think Adam Neville is a very unique writer. I've now read 3 of his novels, and I do think that he is really good at writing scary. I think he's really good at writing atmosphere. I don't particularly like most of his characters, but I'm not really sure if that's kind of his MO or not. However, I loved the Ritual film to an extent, and here was my problem with the Ritual film. As I've said many times, this book is broken into 2 parts. The first half is phenomenal, it is creepy, it is great, and I think it is for the most part perfect. And when the movie creators wrote it, they added another character, they added different motivations, and they took out what I thought were some of the scariest scenes from the first half of the book. Granted, the movie is still scary. The creature design in the movie is so good. It's so good. And they are very true to a lot of the novel, but they do, in my opinion, skip over some of the scarier scenes in the first half of the book. That being said, they completely rewrite the second half of the book, which is absolutely necessary. Make it a little bit more folky, a little less black metalhead focused. And it translates to a much more cohesive story. Again, the second half is nowhere near as strong as the first half in the film, but you do get a different side and a different take on some of the main characters in a way that I can see it translating better to film than it does to the actual novel had they done it that way. That being said, I do think that the first half of this novel is absolutely superior. I will read the back just in case you've never heard of The Ritual before. I do think it's a really cool story. So, when 4 old university friends set off into the Scandinavian wilderness of the Arctic Circle, they aim to briefly escape the problems of their lives and reconnect with one another. But when Luke, the only man still single and living a precarious existence, finds he has little left in common with his well-heeled friends, tensions rise. With limited experience between them, a shortcut meant to ease their hike turns into a nightmare scenario that could cost them their lives. Lost, hungry, and surrounded by forest, untouched for millennia, Luke figures things couldn't possibly get any worse. But then they stumble across a derelict building. Ancient artifacts decorate the walls, and there are bones scattered upon the dry floors. The residue of old rites and pagan sacrifice for something that still exists in the forest. Something responsible for the bestial presence that follows their every step. And as the 4 friends stagger in the direction of salvation, they learn that death doesn't come across easy among these ancient trees. This is a great premise, and both of the movie and the book, I think, follow this pretty well. I will say this novel is more about the main character finding contentment with himself, being okay with who he is and how he's turned out. And I think this is a very strong message in this book. However, in the film, it's almost like they don't want you to be like accepting of yourself. Like, they don't want that to be the message. So they change it and make it about like guilt or survivor's guilt, or, you know, like, what do you do if you let someone die kind of thing. And that really bothered me because I don't think that is at the core of what this book is trying to convey. And I feel like that becomes a big premise or a big theme throughout a lot of the books I'm going to talk about, where they really just undo a lot of the core messaging in the book. And I kind of wonder if it's because they don't want to talk about heavier topics like that in film. I do think horror is the best genre to talk about more taboo, under the surface, hidden topics that everybody deals with. And it's a great way to air it out in a unique way that can also kind of be relatable. Horror is very metaphorical, and I think that this book does that metaphor a lot stronger than the film does, because guilt is used quite often and doesn't need to be. I could have put many Stephen King books on this. Netflix has just adapted 1922, which I have read but not seen yet, and In the Tall Grass, which I have also read but not seen yet. But I think Gerald's Game is probably the most prominent, especially because it was adapted by Mike Flanagan, who also did Dr. Sleep, though that was not for Netflix. I love this book. I think this book is absolutely amazing. The film is great, but nowhere near as good as this. I find the book 100 times scarier. I think the way that they utilize the space cowboy and the implications of who and what the space cowboy is a lot stronger in the book than it is in the film. They don't even call him the space cowboy in the film. He's called the Moonlight Man, and that drove me crazy. But again, we get more into the psychological aspects that the movie tends to look over. Let me read the back of the book first, actually. So, once again, Jessie Burlingame has been talked into submitting to her husband Gerald's kinky sex games. Something that she's frankly had enough of, and they never held much charm for her to begin with. So much for the romantic getaway at their secluded summer home. After Jessie is handcuffed to the bedpost and Gerald crosses a line with his wife, the day ends with deadly consequences. Now Jessie is utterly trapped in an isolated lakeside house that has become her prison, and comes face to face with her deepest, darkest fears and memories. Her only company is that of the various voices filling her mind, as well as the shadows of nightfall that may conceal either an imagined or very real threat right there with her. Again, really good summary of both the film and the book. But I will say what's interesting about this is the vast majority of this novel takes place with Jessie handcuffed to a bed, going through her own psychological meltdown and repressed memories. While both the film and the book do this, I will say the book does it far more strongly because the voices that Jessie hears that speak to her as she is there on the bed in the book are a plethora of different people. When we look at the film, Mike Flanagan chose just to represent the voice of her husband. Now I see from a visual and time constraint standpoint why that would be more effective, especially for a viewer who might not have all of the background information that you need in this in that kind of setting. But when you read it in the book, it makes much more sense because we take the focus of Jessie being upset with who she is in her husband's life and kind of extend it to who she is in her own life, and we take the spotlight off of her husband, who we've already from the very beginning noted is not that good of a person, and we put the focus on her and her own personal growth. And I think it's much better when we get the perspectives of everyone that's contributed to how she's ended up where she is in life and her own reflections. And again, self-acceptance, self-forgiveness, and the ability to move past it become huge topics in this novel. And I think that by removing the voices of a lot of the people around her in the film, again, very convenient for a viewer who doesn't need to be overwhelmed with overly complicated scenarios and minor background characters, that when you have a book that's like 400 pages, you can fit that in and it makes a lot more sense. I do think Mike Flanagan does a really good job of adapting horror novels into the screen, solely because I think he figures out what the core messages are of certain stories and finds ways to whittle them down to fit the narrative he needs to tell in the time constraints that he has. Though I do really wish that they had gone a little bit more in-depth in the film into Jessie's past, because I do think it gives her more depth. Though he was pretty good at keeping a lot of the scares from the story in there. He did make that whole story just as eerie and uncomfortable as the book is, and I'm very pleased with that film, though I do prefer the book. Okay, next up we have Bird Box by Josh Malerman. I will read the back of this for y'all really quickly. Something terrifying that must not be seen. One glimpse and a person is driven to deadly violence. No one knows what it is or where it came from. 5 years after it began, a handful of scattered survivors remain, including Mallory and her 2 young children. Living in an abandoned house near the river, Mallory has long dreamed of fleeing to a place where her family might be safe. But the journey ahead will be terrifying. 20 miles downriver in a rowboat, blindfolded. One wrong choice and they will die. And something is following them. But is it a man, animal, or monster? Engulfed in darkness, surrounded by sounds, both familiar and frightening, Mallory embarks on a harrowing odyssey, a trip that takes her into an unseen world and back into the past, and the companions who once saved her. Interweaving past and present, Josh Malerman's breathtaking debut is a horrific and gripping snapshot of a world unraveled that will have you racing to the final page. I was not a fan of this book. I think this was a 3-star read from me. I liked the premise, I didn't like the execution. I found that there were a lot of plot holes in it, and I just don't like books that kill animals. Yeah, I mean, this is another, it served a purpose. It's not like it's animal cruelty in this, and it served a purpose, and I understand that, but it was definitely just an emotional cash grab, in my opinion, killing an animal. But regardless, I have mixed feelings on both this and the film adaptation of it. The acting in the film adaptation is amazing. The amount of actors in it is just absolutely insane. It's like Sandra Bullock, Sarah Paulson, like the forensic scientist from Lucifer is in it. MGK for some reason is in it. John Malkovich is in it. Like, whoa. B.D. Wong is in it. Like, huge, huge cast. However, they succeeded in elevating the parts of the story that I didn't particularly like, in making them a lot more tangible and a lot more likable, and then took all of the scenes in the book that made this book actually worth reading and rewrote them at a lesser level. And that drove me insane. It was like you had enough foresight to take problematic scenes and scenes that basically generated plot holes for me in this novel. Like using a GPS. Thank God they used the GPS in the film, because I just didn't believe that she was literally just driving a car like I just, oh God, there's so many plot holes in this book. But then they got rid of the scariest part of the book for me. There's actually a couple scenes. The opening scene where our main character, Mallory, gets separated from her sister, I'll leave it at that, is so much more unnerving and scary in the novel. And they completely redo it for convenience sake in the film. And that like just irritated me, because I thought that that was such a strong start to the overall tone of the novel. That I was really stunned that they completely redid it. I mean, I understand why they did. It makes more sense for a time crunch. But again, I just thought it was way scarier in the book. And then to completely downplay the scariest character, the scariest scene, and the absolute devolution and descent into madness that certain characters face while interacting with this character, was just underwhelming. It was like the one scene in the film I was really, really looking forward to, because it was the one scene in the book that convinced me that I need to keep reading Josh Malerman's work, because it was so well done, it was so eerie and so creepy, and they just fully watered it down and took away all of the buildup and all of the suspense and just kind of threw it all at you all at once. And there's so much this isn't even a long book, it's like, what, 300 pages? 250 pages? And there's so much buildup in this book leading up to this scene, and to just completely undo it and just make it so much less, it was just such a bummer, in my opinion. So I don't know, Bird Box is one of those films that, like, the book is fine. I wasn't a fan. I maybe liked the movie better just because I liked it, I think, overall, but it took out all of the scary scenes that I really did enjoy in the novel. But what can you do? It gave Josh Malerman a pretty hefty career, so I think he's pretty happy with that. Okay. Fourth book I want to talk about is I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Ian Reid. I'm not going to read the back of this book because I say this all the time. This is one of the best books to go in blind to. I don't know if I like this book, but this book makes you think a lot. This book is a head scratcher. This book is confusing. It's disorienting. It's weird. And this movie is such trash. The film adaptation of this movie is such trash because they took a psychological deconstruction and turned it into an art film. And I love weird, wacky art films. I love adding this kind of avant-garde element to horror. I think that Ari Aster and Robert Eggers do it beautifully. I think those are phenomenal films. I do not think this book was meant to have that kind of trope. You know, I don't want to say they wanted to make it like a giallo film, but it's just weird. There's like a dance number in the film, and it's like the entire second half is just such garbage compared to the second half of this book. And again, this is a book that it's going to make you uncomfortable, it's going to make you confused, it's going to make everything feel weird, but the movie really lays all of that cliche weird, artsy, funky, things are not what it seems. Like, they laid on so thick that, like, you can kind of figure out what's happening from the get-go, you know? And that's not the point. The point is kind of this, like, again, spiraling descent into psychological madness until you figure out what is going on. And when you figure out what is going on in the novel, it's kind of just like a stab in the heart, you know? And you just feel sad. In the film, it's kind of beautiful. And I feel like the topic that they're talking about should not be glorified or beautified. It's very dark, it's very heavy, it's very tragic. And the film kind of leaves things a little open to interpretation. Like, I watched it with my little brother who's never read the book, and he just looked at me at the end of the film and he's like, what the hell happened? Like, what? Whereas at the end of this book, you're like, oh, I think I know what happened. Oh God, right? And then you read back what's going on, and it makes a lot of sense. And the book is told in sort of in reverse, where you have a few chapters that are very linear as to what's going on, and then a couple other chapters like disperse as like interludes that kind of go backwards, giving you like the big reveal of everything. And so when you read it backwards, it all like makes sense. It's really a unique read. And it just did not translate to film. It just did not translate to film right. And I think they tried, but I think they really overly did it. I think they really overly did it. And and the cat, I mean, it's got Toni Collette in it. And I felt like it almost wasted her character. It's Toni Collette. She's like a queen of horror. But yeah, if you don't watch the film and then read the book, definitely read this book first, because it's so much better and it'll have such a huge impact on you if you read it that way. The film was so disappointing. All right, last but not least on this very ranty, rambling video, No One Gets Out Alive by Adam Neville. I watched this and then 3.5 hours of The Chestnut Man last night because I really wanted to take this video, and I just finished this novel and I really wanted to talk about it. I will read the back of this book really quickly for you. When Stephanie moves to a notoriously cheap neighborhood of Birmingham, she's happy to find an affordable room for rent that's just large enough not to deserve her previous room's nickname, The Cell. The eccentric, albeit slightly overly friendly landlord seems nice and welcoming. The ceilings are high, and all of the other tenants are also girls. Things aren't great, but they're stable. Or at least that's what she tells herself when she impulsively hands over the money to cover the first month's rent and decides to give it a go. But soon after, she becomes uneasy about her rash decision. She hears things in the night, feels them, things or people who aren't there in the light, who couldn't be there, because after all, her door is locked every night and the key is still in place in the morning. Concern soon turns to terror when the voices she hears and presence she feels each night become hostile. It's clear that something very bad has happened in this house, and something even worse is happening now. Stephanie has to find a way out before whatever's going on in the house finds her first. No One Gets Out Alive will chill you straight through to the core. A cold, merciless, fear-inducing nightmare to the last page. A word of caution, don't read this one in the dark. Alright, so this book is really scary. This book is really scary. The film is not. Like, not even in the slightest. It is campy, it has really bad CGI, and it completely rewrites the plot, the characters, everything except for the overarching concept of woman in a house and the landlords aren't going to let her leave. Like, that is literally the only thing. Like, they change every single character's name. Every single character's name. Which drove me absolutely crazy. This is a novel that is a warning, reminder, metaphor for the violence that women can face. Violence that women of all types, of all places, are susceptible to. And it's very brutal and it's very honest, and the first half of this book is very much rooted in reality versus the paranormal of the hardships that women face. This movie decided to throw most of that out the window and make it more about like the hardships that illegal immigrants face in America, which is a noble topic to talk about, but not necessarily when this novel is talking about the exploitation of sex workers, the exploitation and domestic abuse in marriage, the absolute general violence that any woman could face today by a threatening man. Like, there are so many hugely problematic topics that this book really, really showcases that the film decided to just completely ignore for its own personal narrative. And I thought that that was a really, really odd choice to do, because I felt that the message in this book and what made this book scary was the fact that there are ghosts in the first half of this story. I mean, there's ghosts throughout the whole, but in the first half of the story, there are ghosts, but that's not what makes the book scary. And the film decided, we're gonna instead make the ghosts the more prominent factor here. And that I thought was so, well, I thought it was such a wrong decision. I thought it was such an absolutely wrong decision. This novel talks about sex trafficking, it talks about prostitution, it talks about the abuse of sex workers, it talks about, again, the general abuse of the average woman. And the fact that all of that was just completely taken out of this story just bothered me. They completely undid the entire second half of this novel. This book is trying to be like the survivor's tale, right? We get the perspective of our protagonist trying to escape the house, right? And it's all told through her. And it's done in a very claustrophobic way, and in a very unique way at the same time. And it gives this main female character the ability to overcome her oppressors and to potentially escape and to empower her. The film said, let's just make the female lead as bad as her, like, her tormentors, right? Like, I don't want to ruin anything in it, but like the end of the film just pissed me off so much, because it's like, yeah, like the end of this film pissed me off so much because you had a chance to make a story that was empowering for a woman and to allow her to escape and go on to the entire second half of the novel. And the filmmaker said, nope, we're going to stop it right at the halfway point, and we're going to end it with her, like, becoming just as bad as the people that imprisoned her. And that is not a message I want, especially when it's coming from a source material that has such a strong rooted agenda, and it is so feminist and so pro-women. And to just throw that out the window for, like, shock factor was infuriating. And, like, I can talk about the fact that they completely ignored the entire second half of the novel, which was all about, like, the folky horror that Adam Neville is so well known for, along with, like, PTSD, right? And he focuses so heavily on those two factors, and they become the driving factors that make the second half of this novel so terrifying. And I do think the second half of the novel is scarier than the first half of the novel. Even, it's more paranormal and it's more supernatural and it's more, again, folk horror, whereas the first half of the novel is very much rooted in actual things that can happen in reality. And the film said, screw that. We're gonna take the base, like the bare bones of this, tear everything that we don't understand out, and then fill it with whatever we want. And I just thought that they just completely took everything that was scary, everything that was meaningful, everything that was, like, just so pro-women, and we're just like, we don't need that. Why is that here? They even took, like, the whole background of, like, why it's happening and what's happening and how it's happening was just, again, thrown out the window. They were like, magic spooky box. It's the magic spooky box. Like, that was the premise of this film. Evil magic spooky box. And it's just not that in the book. The movie's an hour and, like, 25 minutes. This is, like, a 600-page book. And they butchered it, and the book is really good. And it's the same people who did The Ritual, and The Ritual's a good film, and they just butchered this one. It's a good adaptation. They took out what wasn't needed in The Ritual and recreated what was needed, and in this one they just took out everything that was important in the book. And they were like, oh, ghosts. I'm like, okay, ghosts. Ah, God, it was just infuriating to watch this. I don't recommend watching it, but I do recommend the book. I recommend the book quite a lot. Anyways, so that is my rant on Netflix taking up horror lit and turning it into horror films. I think it's a really cool thing that they're doing. It's definitely exposed me and convinced me to read a lot of the books that I'm reading, because I feel compelled to always read the book before I see the movie, or at least most times, which is what I've tried to do here. So yeah. Oh man, No One Gets Out Alive was rough for me to watch. That was really bad. Anyways, I'm hoping that I will maybe do another one of these on TV series adaptations. I have to finish The Chestnut Man. The Chestnut Man is fantastic so far. It's very, very, very loyal to the book. Very excited about that. So yeah, sometimes they get it right, sometimes they get it wrong. Overall, I think it's a great thing to do because, again, it gets the authors more of the recognition and money that they probably deserve, and they don't always get from just printing novels, especially stuff that's really, really good. Even if the adaptations are crap, it'll get people to start reading and picking up the books and knowing more about the author and just putting them on a higher pedestal. And I think a lot of these authors really do deserve that. So overall, even if the movies suck, I do think it's a good thing that we have going on right now, and I'm very excited to see what else we have in the future. So yes, thank you all so much for watching. As always, I post every Monday and Thursday, sometimes on Saturdays. If you enjoy these videos, hit the like and subscribe buttons down below, and let me know in the comments what adaptations you would like me to just rant about, because I love ranting about these things. It makes me so happy. But yes, thanks again, and I will catch you all in the next one. Mwah.